Hi, everyone. Nice to be here with you guys today. My name's Kiki Fontenot, and I work at the LSU Ag Center as the state vegetable specialist. And so today I thought we'd just talk a little bit about tomato production and some of the variety trials that we've done at LSU. And Sarah, of course, gave me this topic, but even if she hadn't, I would probably say tomatoes are the most popular vegetable crop in the United States. Just looking at commercial production, not even home garden production, we grow, about 1.5 million tons of fresh market tomatoes. So those are like you see the kids eating right here, slicing up for your salads and your hamburgers and sandwiches. And in the United States, we grow about 15 million tons of processing tomatoes. So, while some of us listening in on this might say, well, I don't like tomatoes, or I don't like that acid taste, or it gives me, acid reflux and that kind of stuff, we eat a lot of ketchup, a lot of sauces, and a lot of salsas. In fact, I think I just saw that salsa in the United States now surpasses sales of ketchup. So we do love our tomatoes here. And we love them so much that you can see we eat about 20 pounds per person a year. And what's interesting to me is that tomatoes are popular in Louisiana. About 35% of the households in Louisiana do grow a vegetable garden. And when we look at tomato production in Louisiana, tomatoes rank highest in terms of gross farm value of commercial production again here. So we grow them, as you see right here, in greenhouses here in Louisiana. We grow them in the fields, and we grow them in high tunnels, which is like a pseudo greenhouse where people are growing them in the ground but covered for a portion of the year to get an early harvest. As an example, I was just with Janelle and Brother Glazier last week, and I got a call from them this morning. Their tomatoes and their high tunnels are in the ground, but they are about 5 foot tall and have, huge fruit on them right now. So they'll be selling them this week or next, which is really kind of neat that we can modify our environment like that. To understand tomato production and to do it best, we always have to look at where they come from, right? So the whole idea of centers of origin and where do these wild crops grow naturally, and how can we mimic those environments? Well, tomatoes originally came from the Andes Mountains up in Peru, Chile, Ecuador, that kind of area. We also find them, natural wild populations of them, in the Galapagos, I can never say that word, Galapagos Islands. I know I'm mispronouncing that. So these areas have warm days and cool nights, right? Not what we have here typically in Louisiana. I was just talking to Dr. Owings saying, when we were listening to the University of Illinois talk something about 50 and 60-degree temperatures at night for their warm season crops. And I was thinking, oh, that's more like our cool season crops down here in Louisiana. And when we're growing tomatoes, we wait for the temperature to get warm. So we're planting them, because it's a warm season crop, in March, mid-March for South and some parts of Central Louisiana, and then definitely mid-March through April 1st as our first planting dates for Central to North Louisiana. There's always that chance of a late freeze. I think by this point, I think we're at March 26th today, or 27th. I'll get my dates mixed up. I think we're pretty good for passing all our frost dates now, which is nice. But when we wait this late to plant them, and that's not late, that's our spring dates, right? But getting into like our summer and our fall planting dates of June through early August, those nighttime temperatures are not what tomatoes like, right? Our nighttime temperatures tend to stay hot and don't allow the plants to transpire the way they should. Our plants stay a little bit more stressed than you do see tomato plants in more northern parts of the southeastern United States, and up the eastern coast and over in California and those kind of places. So we can't exactly mimic the climate that we need here, but we can do some things to help guarantee good tomato production. So the first is try to get them out early. I like getting them out mid-March, 1st of April. I don't like waiting until May to plant my hybrids, my heirlooms, things of that nature, because the later you wait in Louisiana, the more fungus is blowing around and the insects are out and famished. They are ready to eat down your tomatoes. So try to get them out early if you can. If you don't have time to plant tomatoes now, and you are going to wait and plant a summer crop for a fall harvest, I really like that mid to late July period. It's going to give you time for your spring tomatoes to continue producing through June, and you can go back in, not in the same rows, not in the same containers, a different portion of the garden, and plant more tomatoes in that late July period for a fall harvest. When we talk about varieties like we'll do today, just know that a lot of these you cannot find at local nurseries. Some of them, like Clegg's Nursery here in Baton Rouge, they watch all our variety trials and they get all their seeds ready to go. It's amazing. But some local nurseries don't follow us as easily. So a lot of times you're going to have to go online and order from Johnny's, Totally Tomato, Rub, Twilly, any of those kind of places if you want to get the recommended varieties that LSU trials and that we really like. Knowing that if you're going to plant for March or April, it generally takes about 8 to 10 weeks from a seed into a small transplant, right? Because the temperatures are cooler and the day length is shorter because we're starting those seeds sometime in January to get them out so we have a decent sized transplant for that spring harvest. Whereas if you wait and you're going to plant a summer set of tomatoes for a fall harvest in Louisiana, it only takes about 6 weeks because those plants are going to be planted in late May. When it's warmer, daylight is longer, so you don't need to start them as early as you do your spring planted tomatoes. Tomatoes love fertilizer. Okay, so if you're growing in the ground, I can't overemphasize enough putting out a pre-plant fertilizer. I'm a big believer in triple 13. I think we just get nice results from that. If you're going to grow a 100-foot row of tomatoes, that would be about 6 to 8 pounds of triple 13. If you're going to grow a 10-foot row of tomatoes, which is more common in backyard gardens, that would be something like, half a pound to a pound for that 10-foot row. If you're growing in containers, we probably wouldn't put triple 13 out. We'd probably go with a slow release fertilizer or something like a nursery special because the potting material, like Sarah was saying earlier, isn't mineral-based soil like in your ground. It's more of like a peat, perlite mixture, some bark, things like that. And that triple 13 doesn't always react perfect with that, whereas a slow release fertilizer makes more sense in those conditions. And of course, depending on what fertilizer you're buying, there's always rates on the backs of the bags. If any of you guys are listening to this and you're like, well, Kiki, I grow tomatoes, and I grow all my fruits and vegetables because I know how I want them grown, and I want to minimize pesticides, and I want to, use more organic techniques. Totally fine. You can do that as well. A nice pre-plant fertilizer could be something like feather meal, from chicken byproducts. The only thing with that is you're going to have to really put it out well in advance, at least a month in advance of planting, so that it has time to break down into the inorganic form so that it's available for plants. A lot of people also want to use manures. Manures are perfectly fine. Just remember, though, these are edible crops. So we don't want fresh manure because it may harbor some salmonella, E. coli, listeria, that kind of thing. So if you're using manures in your vegetable crops or in your vegetable garden, it has to be aged. I like 6 months or older, just to make sure it's not hot and it's not, carrying any of those pathogens we don't want to consume as a person. The other thing that you need to be careful about when you're planting tomatoes, especially in soil that's been amended with manure, is the fact that manure did not come from any animals that were grazing on fields where people use 2,4-D or oxen-like products. There's a product called Grazing out there that a lot of livestock producers will use to kill the broadleaf weeds in their grasses. And year after year after year, every year I've had this job, 11 years now, maybe 12, I can't even remember. We get phone calls in the spring and people's tomatoes are curled and twisted, and they promise and swear on their lives that they haven't sprayed a single thing out there. And almost every single time they've used fresh manure from a field. And then if we trace that back, we can tell that it's been treated with that Grazing or that oxen material, which really twists and curls up your tomatoes and will prevent them from fruiting, and really set you back on your yields. So, that would be a tip from me. Don't really know where those manures come from. Next is spacing your plants appropriately, 18 inches apart minimum, you guys. If you're going to grow the big, beastly heirlooms and indeterminate tomatoes, I might even put that on a 24-inch spacing. You want to really get nice airflow through those through those plantings, because if you don't, you're going to harbor a lot of niche areas for insects to congregate and live and be happy in your tomatoes. And also, when tomatoes are touching one another, we have a ton of fungus that's airborne. We have some soil-borne problems with tomatoes. And just every time water rinses from one leaf to the next, or those branches and those tomatoes are overlapping one another, they're stressed out, and you're going to have more disease problems. So proper spacing is really good. This is really critical in home gardens because a lot of us grow our vegetables in raised beds. So we might have something like a 4-foot wide raised bed by 8-foot long or 10-foot long. And, you know, I've gone out to a lot of home gardens and I see people have crammed in like 20 tomato plants in that small space. Well, they just compete with one another and they end up becoming really tall, leggy, and they produce way less fruit as a whole than if that person would have put 10 tomato plants in that bed, right? So you save a little money up front by not buying the extra plants, but you also just get better overall yields by spacing appropriately. Now, one of the things you can do to open up airflow in that canopy is suckering your tomato plants. So if you look at this bottom picture, to the right is the trunk of the tomato plant, and to the left, bending downwards, is the branch. And what's popping up in that 45-degree angle right there is the sucker. I'd like you guys to pinch off all suckers from the ground level up to the first flower cluster on your tomatoes. That's definitely if you're growing bush type tomatoes. By pinching those suckers, you're going to increase tomato fruit size on your individual fruit. You're going to open up that canopy. You're going to reduce the amount of just soil splashing on that lower fruit, which is going to cause fruit rot down there, or that fruit is so heavy it bends down and touches the soil. So it's a really good practice. Even on your cherry tomatoes, as pictured above, it's going to open up that canopy because our cherry tomatoes are more indeterminate types, meaning the top part of their growing point is a leaf bud, not a flower bud. So it'll keep growing as tall as it can. If you keep watering and fertilizing it, can grow from one side of your house to the other. So on those, we want to sucker from the ground level up to the third flower cluster, okay? Pull all the suckers off. If you're running low on tomato plants and you need more, you can always pop your suckers into a glass of water or into a little pot of soil, keep it moist, and it will reroot and grow you another plant. So there's other added benefits besides just taking them off that plant. If you need extras, you can propagate them that way. But it's really going to help you out with airflow, insect reduction, and disease reduction. I do have on here plastic mulch highlighted. A lot of home gardeners aren't going to use plastic mulch unless you have a really big garden. But the reason why I like showing plastic mulch is even if you have a raised bed and you're growing only tomatoes in it, it might be something that you consider covering the top of the raised bed with, poking holes and planting your tomato plants in. And that's because if we're looking at this tomato cluster again up here at the top, as a home gardener, we love to leave our tomatoes on until they are red vine ripe because they taste good, right? You're building up your sugars, the smell is enhanced, and they just look prettier. Well, you see that one tomato that's at the bottom of the cluster, the third one down on the left-hand side. It's kind of more at what we call breaker point. So it's just starting to turn yellow or orange color. Well, if we get a nice 5, 6, 7-inch rain like we have been this last week getting, and you leave your tomatoes on at breaker point or even kind of a deep orange color, not your perfect red, all that water goes into your pot or into your garden, rushes into the plant, and pops your skins open of your tomatoes. So you'll have these big, beautiful tomatoes or small cherry tomatoes with cracked skins on them. And we want to reduce that, right, by not going into our gardens every 2 weeks and just flooding them. We want to give them a little water each day, or by using plastic mulch to reduce the impact of those heavy rains on those delicate fruit. Okay. So those are some good gardening tips, cultural practices. One last tip is if you're not planting your tomatoes right now, late, March, early April, you're going to wait until that late June, late July, early August time period. Our nighttime temperatures in Louisiana are greater than 75 degrees Fahrenheit. That's going to damage the pollen on the flowers of your tomato plants. If the pollen is damaged on your tomato plants, what's going to happen is you're going to get tomatoes like you see over here on the right-hand side. The reason I have a picture of a tomato cut at the equator at the bottom of this slide is you need a pollen grain to come in and fertilize every single seed cavity around that tomato in order to get a nice round tomato. Okay, everywhere where a seed was not fertilized, you get a dip in the top of your tomato plant. And that's what's happened over here. We had a non-heat set tomato planted in the late summer. And when you cut into that, it's going to be nothing but corky tissue. You're lucky if you get that on a non-heat set variety, because most of the time the pollen is so damaged, you get a big, beautiful plant, tons of flowers, and all the flowers just fall off. It's not a pollination issue, it's a fertilization issue, and your pollen is just being damaged by those high temperatures. So if you wait till late in the season, you have to plant heat set varieties. Heat set varieties are going to be those named with things that make you think of hot temperatures. So places, Florida 91, Phoenix, or the name of the fruit is going to have the word sun, solar, heat, hot, like Sunmaster, Sun Leapers, Solar Set, Sun Gold. Those are going to be your heat set varieties. Plus, it should say it on the tag. So let's go ahead and jump into some of the varieties we like here for Louisiana. One of the biggest tomato fights over which variety is the best always happens to be on Creole tomatoes. What is a Creole tomato? What is the best Creole tomato? Is it a variety? Is it not a variety? Well, there are 4 different definitions that we go by here in Louisiana for Creole tomatoes. The first and probably the most popular for the longest period of time is any variety of tomato, doesn't matter what it is, that is grown in Plaquemine or St. Bernard Parish. Variety is seriously of no concern. They have soil that is good, okay? I don't know how to explain it to you, but what they have is soil that has special minerals in it, right, that flavor or enhance the flavor of the tomatoes. Oftentimes people will refer to this as terroir. So if you hear of things like only certain parts of France can grow champagne grapes, it's that same belief that there's special minerals or certain properties of that soil that flavor those grapes, right? That then can be turned into a sparkling wine or a champagne. All right. Now, so a long time ago, Plaquemine Parish growers, St. Bernard Parish growers marketed their tomatoes as Creole. Had nothing to do with the variety. Around 1969, LSU released a variety called Creole, okay, by Dr. Tim Hernandez. It was not the same variety grown in St. Bernard or Plaquemine parishes at all. But then people started picking it up, thinking it was going to have that same characteristic growth shape, medium size, few cracks, you know, and then it was going to have good flavor. It had more disease resistant to it than good flavor to that particular variety. So that was starting to be used in the trade, okay? Today, at this point, any tomato grown in the state of Louisiana is going to be marketed to you as a consumer as a Creole tomato, whether the farmer's trying to trick you or not. When you go and you buy tomato boxes, specifically our little tomato boats that some farmers will use at farmers markets, it's printed on the box, whether they say to print it there or not, Louisiana Creole tomatoes, okay? So you could be in Shreveport, Plaquemine, Baton Rouge, Point Capee, Alexandria, wherever, and farmers are going to have these boxes. So what's in it isn't necessarily Creole, but technically now that it's a marketing term, any tomato grown in Louisiana is a Creole. And then there's that 4th definition, and that's the one that people think about, that we have that nostalgic memory with, right? The one that my grandmother grew. And if you talk to people and they'll say, no, Kiki, that's not a Creole, that LSU released one that you have growing in your trial right there. Or these down in St. Bernard and Plaquemine, those aren't Creole because my grandma's was a deep red tomato and somebody else's grandma was an orange tomato and somebody else had a maroon tomato and some were short and tall and big and fat and little. And I think it really is just this memory, right? That memory of playing in the soil, being with your grandparents or your parents and eating delicious fresh grown tomatoes from your garden. And I can promise you guys, any tomato you grow in your garden is going to taste way better than the ones at the grocery store, simply because grocery store tomatoes, even the ones that say they're vine ripe, right, were picked either green or at breaker point, just a little smidgen of yellow on them, and then artificially ripened or shipped and ripening, on their way to the grocery store. So they don't have the sugars built up in them that the ones in your backyard have. So anyways, long story short, we get questions about what is a good Creole? What Creole should I be planting every single year? So in 2015, we did a Creole tomato trial, and we looked at tomato seeds that were labeled as Creole, either from LSU or this is the original Creole tomato, the one you've been searching for. And we bought 11 different seed sources from 11 different places. And what we found, you guys, without boring you with details here, is that they are not the same tomato. When someone says this is a Creole tomato, at the store, you can't trust that it's whatever Creole you have in your mind, because all of these were labeled as being an original Creole from LSU. And we found that some of them gave us fruit in 55 days after planting, while others we had to wait 78 days to get the first fruit after planting. We found that some of them weighed 4 ounces and others weighed closer to 8 ounces, for an average tomato size. The amount of tomatoes harvested off these plants varied from 5 to 105 pounds. So they were totally different genetically tomatoes, all marketed as the same thing. Okay, so we can't trust seed labeling sometimes, especially when we're ordering off the internet, and these companies that aren't like your Johnny's or your Rups or your Totally Tomatoes, they're kind of like Etsy based or different versions of that. You don't really know what you're getting. What I can tell you guys without a doubt is that most of the times when people want to plant a Creole tomato, we're looking for that great flavor. And I've grown the Creole tomato seed from what was Naylor's Hardware, and they have now joined up with Clegg's, I think since 2017, Dr. Owings, after the floods. Johnny Naylor has sourced the same Creole seed from the same place year after year after year. And I've had it in the 2015 trial, I've had it in trials before then, and I've had it in trials after then, closer to today's date. And every single time we put that tomato in our trials, it wins taste test by at least 95% of the people eating it love the flavor of that tomato. So if you have the time or the energy to run down to Clegg's and get the Creole seed from them, I guarantee you it will have good flavor, okay? We're still doing these trials. Just this past year during COVID, we grew another Creole tomato trial, and this time we planted it instead of at Burden in our Baton Rouge soils. We put it down in Plaquemines Parish with Matt Renatza. He's the second guy from the left in that top picture right there. Great tomato farmer, and you can see all the tomatoes in the trial growing in that middle picture. And we looked at some of the tomatoes that were grown in the 1960s and 1970s when Creole was first, being really marketed, right? And when it was that St. Bernard Plaquemine Parish tomato. So we looked at some of the older varieties. We brought Chef Dickie Brennan, he's famous in New Orleans for a lot of restaurants there, down to Matt's farm. We picked tomatoes off of each of our varieties that were fully ripened, and we brought them back to his restaurant, cut them up, and had all the chefs do taste tests that work with him. And what we found was the Super Fantastic, which you can find in a lot of garden stores across the way, was one of the tomato flavors that they liked best out of all the older varieties that we were looking at. So Creole from Naylor's or Super Fantastic if you're looking for that indeterminate type tomato with good flavor, okay? But when we start talking about flavor, we start thinking, well, Kiki, why aren't you recommending heirlooms? I hear heirlooms have good flavor. The reason why LSU doesn't recommend a lot of heirlooms commercially is because the yields on them are very inferior to our hybrid varieties. And because they do taste good, we have some hybrids that I would say rival the taste of some of these heirlooms, but because they're so squishy, I don't know a better term, but they're not firm, okay? When we sell tomatoes to the grocery store, they're double stacked in 20-pound boxes. And sometimes with these heirlooms, if you double stack them, the bottom part is going to crack or smush or start leaking juices, and the grocery stores are going to reject that load. But for home gardeners, for backyard gardeners, we still like to trial heirlooms. We did this study in 2012, 2013, and again 2017, and we were looking at multiple varieties of heirloom tomatoes. They were given all the things they need to make them successful: plastic mulch, drip irrigation, good fungicide spray schedules. They were staked nicely. They had all the fertilizer they could ever use. And when we looked at these heirloom tomatoes, the best of the best that I could find was this one, Thessaloniki. It's a small fruit, probably 6 ounces, 4 ounces or so in size. Beautiful red interior, beautiful red exterior. The problem a lot of people had with it when they were looking at it in our heirloom trials was they thought this was some kind of hybrid that we put in just to trick them. Not because of the flavor, but because it was too perfect looking, they said. They feel like heirlooms should have more cap facing and scars and problems with it. But this truly is an heirloom plant. And it did very well in the trial. In fact, it and Black from Tula were the top yielders. The Black from Tula, the only problem was, even though it was in top yields, most of them were unmarketable, whereas Thessaloniki was just gorgeous and had good marketable yields, not just good overall yields. Here's red brandy wine, which a lot of people like to grow. You're going to see why it had good, excellent yields, but why I don't like it is a lot of people are looking to slice these up for your BLTs hamburgers. And when we cut into red brandy wine, more often than not, even getting lots of calcium nitrate and that kind of thing, you can see the little white circles around the edge of the tomatoes and the big white blotches within this one variety. I didn't care for that. People want it to be nice and red throughout. German pink, on the other hand, was a nice big tomato. Firmness was pretty good in this. It had a few cracks, like you see in the bottom left, some radial cracks coming off this tomato. Very typical of heirlooms. When we get heavy rains, they're going to crack radially, going from the stem scar out, okay? And the reason why we don't like that commercially is because they start to get fungusy and rotty right there. And that's not good for selling them. If you can pick them a little early in your backyard garden and let them fully ripen inside, you can avoid some of that, radial cracks if you get them out before a big rain. Pretty interiors, pretty exteriors, good flavor. This one was one of the top voted in the heirloom trials on flavor, German pink. Mortgage Lictor also had pretty good flavor on it as well. The interior color was good. The exterior color was good. Mostly a medium-sized fruit. Most people think of Mortgage Lictor as being this huge, big fruit, but the claim to fame behind that name is the guy who bred and released that tomato made so much money he paid off his mortgage in a year. So that's how it got that name right there. Now, this one is one that if I were going to recommend an heirloom, I'd want you guys to try. It's called persimmon. It is definitely the color of persimmon fruit. Orange exterior, the prettiest orange interior I have ever seen. The hybrid that would rival this one right here would be BHN 876, which is also orange interior, orange exterior. This one, you guys, does not have an acid flavor. It has a very sweet flavor to it. Big, beautiful, robust plant, pretty firm. You're going to see radial cracks, which I don't like on there, and very large to extra large fruit on this one. Now, we repeated that 2012 trial that I just showed you guys in 2013. 2013, we had a hot summer, barely any spring. So what happened was, I think a lot of that pollen was starting to get damaged in these heirloom plants, even though we got it out in late March. We made big, beautiful plants. We made tons of blooms. And if I picked 2 or 3 fruit per plant, I was lucky that year. So you got to understand when you're planting heirlooms, they're not always heat tolerant. Some of them are, some of them aren't. And it's really environmentally dependent. And that's why I can't recommend these to commercial producers. But if you want to put them out in a home garden, 1 or 2, 3, 4, 10, sure, go for it. Just put out some, what I like to call hybrids or some crop insurance tomatoes as well. Here, we repeated another heirloom variety trial in 2017. You can see the varieties we tried: Cherokee Purple, Carbon, Conestola, Nebraska Wedding, Persimmon, etc. This pink Brandywine Master and red Brandywine Master are heirloom hybrid crosses. We also had Windsall in this one. You guys, total flop. Over 50% of the fruit that we harvested out of this beautiful trial that you see behind me, that was in the early stages of growth right there, was rotten on the vine before they were even ripened. Again, I just can't recommend heirlooms to y'all. What I can recommend are some really great hybrids, okay? Bella Rosa, Mountain Spring, Mountain Merit. You cannot go wrong. All of them are tomato spotted wilt virus resistant, wonderful tomatoes. BHNs, these, I hate the fact that they don't give, a good name, right? They just call it a number. But BHN 981 and 1021. Remember those numbers, BHN 981, 1021, big, juicy, red, firm tomatoes, wonderful tomatoes. The BHN 876 is going to be an orange tomato that has excellent flavor to it. Celebrities, of course, we're always going to recommend those. They're kind of losing their vigor a little bit, but people still love them. Creole from Clegg's or Naylor's Hardware is excellent. The cherries, the two cherries pictured in the middle are my absolute favorites in terms of yield and flavor. You've got chocolate sprinkles to the top right. It's never going to be fully red. It's always going to have those green speckles, but it tastes like someone salted that tomato before you even put it in your mouth. The sun gold, which is in the middle right there, is going to have that persimmon color again. It's a very sweet flavor. The orange tomatoes tend to taste sweeter. And then if you guys are looking to win the contest in your neighborhood for size, you want to go with Skyway, Valente, or XTM 2261 from Cicada and Seeger Seeds. So you guys can get those from Harris, Rupp, places like that. Jacob's Hands are down here in the bottom. All of our XTMs that we harvested off our plants were bigger than softballs. So if you're looking to win, size, that's what you need right there. You guys, we can argue all day long about what the best variety is, but if you really want to get in a fight, just go to Bunel, Spain. Every year they have La Tomatina, where you can go and throw 20,000 pounds of tomatoes at one another. Tomato fights have been happening for a long time. We don't just fight in Spain with tomatoes. We don't just fight about varieties. There was even, just the fact of is a tomato a fruit or a vegetable went all the way to the Supreme Court at one point. There was a man named Nix. He imported tomatoes in 1883 or so. They had a tax coming on imported vegetables, 10%, but not on imported fruit. He argued that tomatoes were fruit, but because botanically speaking, yes, they are fruit, right? They're ovarian tissue around seeds. But he lost that challenge in the Supreme Court because they have a heartier flavor, not a sweeter flavor. So there's all kinds of jokes about what is a tomato, a fruit or a vegetable. Tons of stuff we can fight on, but lots we can agree on. And the one thing I want to leave you guys with is no matter what variety you select this spring or this summer, the fact is you should be trying tomatoes in your backyard. Put them in a pot, put them in the raised bed, put them in the ground. Choose a variety I recommended, choose something else. It doesn't matter. What we want you to do is get out there and get growing.